Hello and good afternoon, or good morning, good evening to everyone, and welcome to Shemakes Voices. We have been organizing episodes inviting our advisory board for the European projects Shemakes. And today we have the honor to have with us Grace June, is a tenure track assistant professor at the University of Georgia. And we will discuss with her about creative practices that increase social inclusion, and mainly also how we can create methodologies and inclusive design and accessibility applied to the fashion practice. And this is the best opportunity to have with us today Grace June, because she has been leading, she has amount tremendous of work done in this topic and through the Open Style Lab, and also through her many workshops that have been led, bringing together different stakeholders. So hello, Grace, how are you?
Hi. Yes. Thanks for having me. This is so exciting.
Thank you for being part of the Shemakes advisory board. I hope that you are looking into the documentation, the open source documentation that we are creating with all the different workshops that they are pushing the boundaries for being more inclusive. But today we want to talk a little bit about inclusivity beyond gender, and we think that you are the most appropriate person to talk about that. Could you tell us a little bit about your work and what you have been doing in this field?
Yeah. So again, I'm Grace, and during the daytime, I'm a professor at the University of Georgia, primarily working with graphic design students. I teach core curriculum on graphic design and communication design, but also interaction, digital mediums as well. On my other side, I've been helping to lead and develop a nonprofit organization called Open Style Lab. And the lab is dedicated to co-designing with people with disabilities wearable solutions in an inclusive way. So through that, I've been practicing my own design practice, building curriculums, and of course, experimenting with my own design thoughts on creative practice. And so I'm excited to share that because I think Shemakes really is leveraging some of the ways that knowledge can be more accessible for female entrepreneurs and creatives, and of course, young girls who I think really would value from a lot of the curriculum and the changes that you're bringing.
So could you tell us some projects? Could you give us some example of projects that you have been working on so that the audience can understand how they can integrate creative practices and inclusivity?
Yeah, I think everyone's been affected by COVID and the pandemic. And at the very height of the pandemic, I was asked to create a mask design by the Washington Post. And that was in response to a lot of people that I was talking to, from rehab centers to hospitals and disability groups, and even my own board member at Open Style Lab who has a disability, on how to put on a mask and making sure that mask is designed in a way that anyone or more people could be able to put on. So I created the open source pattern template. You just type in my name, mask design, Washington Post. Uh, it's one of the design projects I absolutely thought was awesome to work on because I've never been asked by a press to respond to a pandemic issue. But really, I think being considerate as much as I can of leveraging pattern making, open sourcing, and of course, thinking about the end user for the usage of masks, especially when we didn't have supplies during that time.
So this would be a kind of a project that you've worked in the last 2 years that was looking into really giving mass access, no, to this COVID responding, let's say. But would you have some other projects? I know that you have worked with putting together designers and people with disabilities, like co-creating with the user. So how can you tell us about the methodologies that you're using in that?
Yeah, I think jumping off from the mask practice, we did a workshop through Open Style Lab on really looking at co-creators who have, hearing disabilities, and also ways for the masks to be transparent for them to be able to speak. So I remember we worked with a few students and young youth who have hearing disabilities to co-create and extend upon that mask design. And that engaged anyone from, fashion practice to the disability group to activists, engineers, material science majors, anyone that was really interested in looking at an inclusive approach, and classically also involving occupational therapists. So we had a pretty multidisciplinary team. And our methods really are to leverage how multidisciplinary co-design is practiced. At the start, always including people with disabilities. And we start with interviews to collaborative sketches, and then, of course, rounding up that feedback to summarize in an accessible format, too, which was also another challenge.
So you're saying that actually each person is unique and the solutions, they are not fitting to all. And that's talking and tackling a little bit the topic of customization. Nowadays, we are very progressive in the Industry 4.0 that we have the means and technologies to mass customize things. And I think that it's a new era also for being more inclusive and being more thoughtful of the different case scenarios we have around us. But sometimes we feel also that when we learn design, or where we go to school and study design, that this topic is a little bit overlooked. And I would like to ask you, what was your turning point to personally bring these practices into teaching methodologies?
Yeah, I left the IT industry at the height when user experience was really getting popular. And I saw the potentials of technology really taking off, but there was a lack of connecting with actual people. So designing for people, I felt, was giving way to designing with. And having that human-centered approach, having the experience to work with end users as part of your process was something I didn't feel industry, nor I think at that time I was experiencing through just app design and, of course, user experience. So I wanted to practice human-centered design and make things and create relationships, which started Open Style Lab. So literally going to, disability sessions, whether it's spinal cord injury meetups to like access groups about like technology not being accessible for live captioning. All of that has informed me for the past decade about how to bring accessibility closer through my practice.
And would you say that in this domain there is unbalance, some gender unbalance between men and women in the tech environment that they want to provide these solutions? Or do you have another approach to gender and inclusivity, like that it shouldn't be divided just men and women, but broadened in more groups?
Yeah, I think for like women, we are often not provided the opportunities that sometimes our male counterparts are. And we come across to that access isn't just given to you. I think that's sorry about that. So women are not only often given the provided opportunity to their male counterparts to have some access to some of the things that I think are a privilege for design and business, especially when it comes to investing or having the access to work with like bigger groups really easily. And so I found myself asking more and more to search between the intersectionality of gender, disability, and design. And so when you think of it as disability as not just being a monolith or just women being a certain type of woman and having that, stereotyped or pigeonholed to one category, it's so much helpful to see where we actually overlap and have intersection to be able to create some of those opportunities in business today.
How could we encourage then women to enter into this sector?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Most of the time, I think I found that it's really about having the right mentorship and surrounding yourself with the people that you want to develop with. Open Style Lab is all predominantly made up of women. And it's because we're reflective, mostly in the US, a lot of young girls and women are identified in the disability population as probably the most underserved and probably the less people who have access to things. So naturally, our organization are all women or women identified. And within that, a lot of the women also have different ways of approaching race, how they define their gender, and of course, disability as part of their experience.
Yes, actually, it's very similar to what we are doing in Shemakes, that we have the advisory board, we have then the gurus that they serve as role models for the ambassadors that they are later disseminating and replicating the activities in the new labs. So we have 18 labs that currently they are running open and free activities all over Europe. But also our practices are open to the public, so anyone can go through our documentation. And I think that you also mentioned that in your project, you have some projects that they are documented and open sourced. What would be your position into this kind of open culture?
I mean, I think these days people are getting their knowledge from different places, whether it's online, on their own. Like, even my students, they're learning from different sources, and you can't expect to be the only source to provide, other people access. So I think it's really important to have an open mind and to really value the work that you do to be accessible. But not everything needs to be out there that you do. You should definitely distill and summarize, I think, things that are maybe valuable for your public and for your user audience. So at Open Style Lab, we have a few journals that are for sale around the research that we do. Of course, there are discounts for students and the disabled community, but more of it is really going back to our community to hire lecturers that are people with disabilities, to bring stipends for kids with disabilities as well. So there is a model where you can generate, I think, that yes, it's open source, but it has to give back. And can it give back to generating more content?
And in this field, I think that did you have some of the participants that they afterwards got opportunities through Open Style Lab to work in this domain? Do you have some similar story to share with us? That would be very encouraging.
Yeah, we have a few of our fellows who are part of the summer program go off to either different disciplines. For example, we had an engineer fellow who was studying mechanical engineering go into more user experience for like hardware products. And then most recently, we've also had some design or fashion fellows kind of bring in design inclusion at like large retailers like Ralph Lauren. So they really are, I think, at the point of change to bring into corporate culture adaptive fashion. And it's exciting to see where everybody goes.
How could we make fashion more inclusive? That's a very big topic, I guess, but I would like to hear from you, since you mentioned also like big brands. So how could we make fashion more inclusive?
Yeah, I think first is hire, employ, disability talent. They are the experts in the field. And definitely make your teams multidisciplinary because you want different perspectives of having disability as a temporary, permanent, or a lived experience. Everyone has a different experience to it. There's also different categories like cognitive or physical disability as well. So either way, I would always start off with a person, especially someone who has that experience, and then bring in complementary team members who also have the multidisciplinary skill set to be able to identify certain pain points, needs, or opportunities where design could be leveraged to be more accessible for more people.
And could clothes be more inclusive? That's a nice topic.
Yeah, we see that already in the plus size market, as well as I think our approaches to what is considered sustainable or circular as a model for clothing. There's many ways it could be inclusive of actually the people who make the clothes and labor rights and consider, where do your clothes go? So inclusion means a big scope. But in my case, I think if you're thinking of disability inclusion, you can think of clothing that's simply, adjustable for a seated body position to a standing body position. And you could see sometimes some fabrics, some silhouettes don't really allow for that kind of movement to be transferable.
Do you think that it is always the answer is to use different technologies, or have you experienced other solutions that they are low tech, or is technology always in the middle?
I think, there's an oversimplification of what technology is. I feel like a lot of people see it as something that's not open to bias or to question. They're like, oh, it's tech and this is what we used, and it's AI, but it's really, I think, more complicated than that. And I find that more of the more soft skills, the more like integration of all skills, whether it's design or technology tools, really elevate, the quality of work that you're doing. It's not really the what, but how you do it and how you integrate what's actually necessary for the purpose of your design.
Also, I have this feeling that technology is kind of ubiquitous, like it's everywhere. And I think that the problem sometimes is the level of engagement of us with technology, because we are consumers a little bit, so we use it and then we don't want we want something new. And I think that it is the same in the field of fashion. uh, yes. So I don't know. It's how would you say that? How could we think of technology beyond the gender topic? We see that there is a very, very big divide there. And I think that we are trying to define ways. We, from the Shemakes part side, we are more practical. We are like equipping the women and beyond women with skills that they are technological skills. But what would be your advice to us?
I mean, I think keep learning. Really, I see a different tool or software being introduced or an update every time for even the basic graphic design skills that my students have to learn. But I also think, again, back to like, what's your main message? What is your goal? And do you actually really need to use JavaScript or like something highly technical? Can you not leverage some of the existing technologies? So I think it's great to explore, but to use it as like a tool for your expression instead of heavily relying on it to solve your entire investigation would be my advice.
Yes, like the technology is the vehicle, but it's not the end scope, you're saying. Yes, I think so. And I think that sometimes in the gender topic, we feel that it is not a very accessible environment for women, the tech environment. Would you think some of the reasons of why this is happening?
I think having women more visible in the technology sphere also relies on management. So having more women leaders who are in larger tech companies, kind of standing for that example is really critical. I think also at the same time, what Shemakes is doing is providing information and resources for especially young students, young girls to be able to think about that position in their future life and thinking about the skill sets to explore. So I think it's two things. You need people that you can look up to and see where they are and pushing the glass ceiling. And then you also need to not forget, how do we distill that knowledge, information, and talent to more women and to young girls?
Actually, I think that you are a very good example, because you are a woman that leads a very successful and that has a lot of repercussion, the Open Style Lab. So, have you ever felt uncomfortable because you were very successful with your Open Style Lab and you were a woman, or you felt marginalized for some reason?
Yeah, I think first, it's great that you say we look successful. There are so many moments where I think there are challenges to building a company. There are challenges to run nonprofit and workshops with people with disabilities. I had to learn a lot from other people. So I think if it looks smooth, that's great. But just to tell everyone, it's not all smooth and it's not all just a surface glorification of, yes, we do design for disabled people, right? It's not like that. I think it's really about the relationships. And like sometimes relationships have problems, right? There's like tense, there's disagreements, there's arguments. There are, of course, ways to innovate with projects. And so I think in that way, I've been probably privileged to have all of those experiences, good or bad, kind of color the way I've done my business. And when I put myself out there, I kind of just don't get scared anymore. I used to, but when I pitch to like now, an investor or like a very large corporation or a tech company, I'm very comfortable in like, this is what I'm doing. And I think it relates to something you're doing. And if you don't think so, that's okay. But I think you might want to be inclusive of more people than your current audience. And I just leave it there. And I feel like people could appreciate when you're not intruding on their own goals and their own thoughts and management and leadership skills, but also introduce them that there are barriers for a lot of other people to become part of that conversation.
These are very nice words. I can resonate a lot on that, and I think that honesty and transparency and being able to say I'm here, I'm doing that, and if you want what I am doing, then we can collaborate. But maybe this is not exactly what you're searching for, or maybe it's not compatible. So I think that. I think I have this feeling that within networks that are more women-led, at least personally, I feel more comfortable knowing that there is kind of honesty and transparency, and there is understanding somehow. It's kind of within the network. Do you think that it's the same also in other contexts, like you were saying before, of pitching in a big company? Do you feel safe in this environment?
I think I feel safer now more with myself and the confidence of trying to represent the best I can of my own peers and my teamwork who've worked so hard. And hopefully the colleagues like yourself that I get to meet, and if I had to pitch a project that we're doing, right? And to be really comfortable enough to also say no when I think a client or a corporation pushes in a way that doesn't align with your values. For example, I've had companies say, we just want like, people with disabilities from your team to come later to test these products. And I'm like, no, sorry, that's not how we work. I think they need to be appreciated for their time, and there's more to the design process than you're giving credit for. And I explain that, and I take the time to do it without hostility. And having that comfort of saying no, I think can be really powerful for a lot of women, that you don't need to always fit in everywhere. It's okay. Not yet, at least.
Yeah. Very nice. Well, so what would be your what is, could you tell us, like, because we have a little few more minutes, could you tell us one of the inspiring projects that you are currently working on, or that you have worked on, that as an example?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm at this point where I feel like I'm repeating a lot of things to either students or people who want to talk to me about a collaboration, or they're starting their own adaptive fashion tech business, whatever it is. So I've been writing a book, and it'll be out by Bloomsbury Publishing next year, on how to really talk about inclusive design in the context of fashion, and not really show like how to do it, but show narratives, examples of collaborative approaches, that design is messy, the process is messy. It's inclusion isn't just like a one type of way to do everything, right? So I think there's really multiple ways to approach it, and I'm trying to highlight those experiences in my book. So that's my pet baby project right now to
That's
work.
fascinating. I'm very happy to hear about it, and I hope that you can take the time to concentrate, because writing a book must be it takes like quite a long time, I guess. I think that in terms of designing, whether it is fashion or it is accessories, or it goes into other domains, what we are used to mainly is that we define a problem and then we try to find solutions about it. But I think that what you're saying here is that with inclusive design, the problem is not predefined. The problem is defined together with the stakeholders and the users. So that's very, I think that I would like to keep that. This you didn't say it exactly, but you said it now, that when you were talking about your book, you somehow said this, but in a very subtle way, and I would like to point out on that, because this is a different approach to design. It's Yeah, because we are saying there is the problem of sustainability, there is a problem of all of these big words, but these big words, they don't mean anything if they don't get contextualized in a group that is inside the process. No, it is, or it is the one that is the target group. No,
Yeah.
so the problems need to be redefined by the users. This is something that it's very interesting to
Yeah,
discuss.
and I think for women, you've probably heard this a lot, like DEI, universal design, accessibility, all these terms that ask for more diverse or equitable ways for people to access things. And like accessibility and inclusive design both work hand in hand to lower barriers that exclude people from products or designing effectively. But inclusive design is strongly process-based. So I'm talking about, how does process inform how you approach something, not just like, here's the problem, now you come in later and we can design for you when we're done with our prototyping. So 100%, I agree.
What would be your last advice to all of these people that they would like to become a little bit more inclusive in their fashion design practices?
Just get comfortable with the uncomfortable. I encourage people, especially, to work with people you normally don't approach on a day to day. I tried collaborating from anyone from like a rehab facility to a friend with spinal cord injury, just to like talk and just understand their perspective on some of the things that we share in common, like getting a taxi ride, going for, a swim, and all of these activities that are socially shared. And so I think I would really recommend people to approach people you normally don't hang out with, because that has helped shift my perspective and biases on design tremendously.
Yes, this is very nice, because we are always somehow in our safety bubble, and this safety bubble is not exposing us to the unknown, and the unknown is actually, it is quite challenging, but it is very enriching. No, so even in when you talk about different social classes, or when you talk about different disciplines, or when you talk, so I think that it's a very nice thing to suggest, to get out of our comfort zones. I love it. Thank you so much, Grace, for your time.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye bye.